and unmute. Okay.
All right, you are live. Call me if you need me for
Thank you
anything.
very much, Danielle. Thanks, Danielle. Good evening, folks. This is the Red Hook Town Board meeting of September 13, 2022. Would you be kind enough to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. I will beg your forgiveness in advance as we are doing a hybrid meeting, both in person and live streaming on Panda's YouTube channel, and also broadcasting here on the big screen in the main courtroom with showing the folks at home what our agenda is. It's a very short agenda as far as number of items on the agenda. And we do have a presentation from our engineers on edge study, a draft document to present to the town board. And we have a couple of resolutions related to staffing. We start out this meeting, the first meeting of September, as all first meetings, with the supervisor's report. This is a report of the period ending August 31st, 2022. And budget adjustments from our bookkeeper and Conway. If you have any questions about those, and as always, the variance report. Any questions, folks? For the folks at home, that's September. We'll be starting our budget season for next year. We've been working with the departments already for some time. With my office, we start in April. So there'll be more on that. In the next couple of months, we'll be setting up budget meetings and hearings. Okay, any questions, town board members? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept the supervisor's report and the budget adjustments. Oh, well, I was entertaining the motion.
Oh,
Would you be the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion. Thank you, Christine. All in favor, Julia Solomon?
Aye.
And myself, thank you very much. Deanna, would you be kind enough to give us your town clerk's report, please?
Town clerk's report.
And I will screen share.
The town clerk's report for the period of August 1st to August 31st, 2022. Total local shares remitted to the supervisor, 6,700.
Going in and out.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. we're
you can
cutting
hear
in
me?
and out. We can
Okay.
hear you. You're cutting in and out, but
Okay.
we can. Yeah.
So total local shares to the supervisor, $6,719.93. New York State Agriculture and Markets for the spay neuter program, $30. The amount paid to New York State Department of Health for marriage licenses, $180. Amount paid to New York State Environmental Conservation for hunting and fishing licenses, $1,653.07. And the total state, county, and local revenues, $8,583.
Thank you very much, Dana. Is there anything before we go on to your abstracts? Is there anything on licenses that you wanted the folks at home to know?
Just that it's the law and people should be licensing their dogs. Can come in and it's $15 for spayed and neutered dogs and $22 if they are unspayed or unneutered. And usually those are, puppies, 4 months and older can be licensed. And your rabies, you need your updated rabies. So vouchers.
Thank you very much.
I certify that vouchers number 29458,
Yeah,
2554, processed in the month of August 2022, are an accurate reporting of the abstracts approved by the town board.
I have that on the screen.
Yes. Did you hear me read them? Did you hear me read them? Hello, are you frozen? I'm frozen.
We're back. Let's hope it stays stable. The internet seems to be unstable here.
I approve those vouchers.
Thank you.
I don't know, they'll be in the record in the minutes.
Thank you very much. We were able to project them. And I move on now to to accept a motion by Julia.
Yep.
A second by Christine, and all in favor, Bill Hamill. And myself to accept the town clerk's report. Thank you very much, Tiana, and thanks for your patience as the technology continues to all right, we're gonna move along. We have it's gonna take a while for it to load, we'll say. Yeah.
Cast into that big TV over there.
Unfortunately, that we need to do. I mean, we Good. We can do the screen.
No, the public will not be able to see us. Well, the photo, we're not speaking, and in particular, that the public is supposed to be able to see you all the time.
Yeah, we'll get that. We'll get that. Okay. All right. To the Wi-Fi. It's related because it's wireless here. You're in a connected network. It's not the same. The Wi-Fi is in Ann's office. I even have the door open. Yeah, I mean, we didn't have issues with it before.
Everything's fine.
You can see us?
Everybody else?
Okay,
No, just Robert.
yeah,
It's all over his-
yeah. Okay, so we're gonna try. Well, not at the moment. No. No, it comes from here. I think it's working, right? Ryan, are you able to see the movement in the screen?
You are now back up and running, but there's been some large moments of pause on your end.
Well, thought so. Okay, we're gonna try it this way. And I'm gonna move the laptop so you can see all the town board members. All right, so be patient, folks. Right. Sit down here. You're gonna have to look at my head, guys. So need a technicality.
Yeah, we.
Okay. Thanks for your patience, folks. Unfortunately, we've got you all in there. We're working there. We're working there, Julie. We're working there. Okay. Something like that. All right, very good. So folks, next up, we have a couple of resolutions, or actually letters, side letters, amending the contract with the highway unit. A side letter of agreement. We're pleased to say a while back, we were able to rehire one of our employees in the highway department. And now we're hiring back the second one. So we have a letter of agreement between the town of Red Hook and the United Public Service Employees Union, otherwise known as UPSU. And we're pleased to hire Ray Casavant back. And the terms of which are outlined in this side letter. And this will get us back to what we believe is a sustainable level of staffing. And we'll be looking also for some seasonal and temporary help should we fall below that minimal level of staffing. We also have, as a result of that, in order to continue to retain our employees and keep pace with the marketplace, we have added to the hourly wage in recognition of their good work and also the inflation that's going on, and making sure that we're competitive with other municipalities. And so we have a memorandum of agreement related to that. Town board members, any questions? I know you've had a chance to study this for a while. Any comments, anything?
Sounds to me.
Looks good. Looks good. Okay, so why don't we take it by motion? We'll do both. To approve the side letter of agreement with the union and the memorandum of agreement. And I so move.
I'll second.
Thank you, Bill Hamel. Any further questions or discussion? If not, all in favor, Christine Kane. Thank you, Julia Solomon.
Aye.
There you are. We captured you this spring. Okay. All right, well, technology not working as well as we would like, but we're happy to have with us Ryan Morrison. Ryan, why don't you turn on your video? I think we're all set for doing what we need to do on our end. There you are.
I'm here.
Thanks for your patience, Ryan.
No problem. Help me understand, Robert, a little bit about what folks can see if we're presenting. Like if I share screens, would the board members be able to see that? Should I be more descriptive in my description of what we've done or what this report's about? Or can I use visuals? Should I not use visuals? I guess is what I'm looking for.
The board has the packet. They have hard copies.
Okay.
So it'd be good to have it up on the screen.
Okay.
Will also be helpful if you're referencing a particular section,
Yeah.
just to let us know so we can flip to that.
Sure, I can do that.
Okay. Take it away, Ryan. Do you want to do a little background on this? Suffice to say that we were contacted by some folks in Forest Park and wondered if the town could assist them, in particular, certain places that were experiencing flooding and drainage issues, right? And so you take it from there if you would, please.
Sure. So back in, I believe, early spring or late winter of this year, I think we were engaged by the town of Red Hook to do a study in Forest Park community. We started off by doing an inventory and a survey of the community, which we presented on late spring. Some of a summary of the findings that we presented late spring regarding the inventory and the survey that we completed was that Forest Park is a community that was constructed and approved in the 1950s. There are some houses that have been constructed as recently as in the 2000s, but most of the subdivision approval was completed in the late 50s, early 60s. The piece of land that Forest Park was developed on by today's standard would probably be considered a marginal piece of land for the intensity of the Forest Park development, meaning likely if we were to develop that parcel today, we would have probably spread out the parcels a little bit more. We probably would have taken into more consideration drainage areas and stormwater management. From historical aerial photography of the Forest Park community, we can tell that prior to its development, some areas in the middle of the development appear to have wet areas in them. We can tell this by how vegetation is growing in the areas and kind of the overall look of the areas. From current mapping and today's mapping, the New York State Environmental Resource Mapper shows that the Forest Park community is surrounded on both the east and west sides by state wetlands. State wetlands defined as being 24 acres or larger. So these are large wetland complexes, and they pretty much surround this community. So all of that put together means that we've got a recipe for wet conditions. Additionally, the soils that make up the area of the forest park community are about 40% type C or D soils. C or D soils, when I say that, that's referencing the hydraulic soil group. So that's how well a soil drains during a rainfall event, C and D being worse draining soils, A's and B's being better draining soils. So we've got the opportunity for bad soils, wet surrounding the area. And then furthermore, and this is happening all across New York, and we're doing a number of these studies for communities, is we've got increased rain intensities in New York. New York measures rain intensities both in frequency and how intense storms are. And that is happening more frequently everywhere. We're having more frequent rainstorms at higher intensities. And so a lot of these marginal properties that were developed are kind of coming to the forefront, and we're doing these studies on them. As I said, to start out, we did an inventory assessment of the forest park community. We inventoried all of the catch basins, the stormwater lines. We tried to get all of the swales that we could view from the right of way. We inventoried all the outfalls, and we put them in a GIS system, and that is now part of the town's GIS system. So when Teresa Burke from the Highway Department wants to check on a catch basin, there'll be a photo that's there available for her. What our condition assessment of the catch basin would be, sizing of the pipe. We can't really do condition of the pipe. I'd just like to note that condition of the pipe, because they're long linear structures, we could only view what we could see from above. We did not CCTV these pipes. So we did not speak to condition assessment, but we gave her material and what their size are. We did do condition assessment on catch basins. In total, I think we inventoried 8 outfalls. Oh, Robert's already got it up there for me. 39 catch basins, about a mile of drain pipe within the community, and then 3 small swales that do play an integral part of the community's drainage system. I would say in general, the drainage system within the community is in good condition. We didn't identify a large amount of failing structures or a large amount of failing pipes. We did note a couple of structures that need to replace, and that is in our report a little bit further down. We can get into that. And so we'll identify those to Teresa, and they're more of maintenance items than they are an integral part of this assessment, but we just wanted to make sure that those structures don't get forgot about and somebody gets out to take a look at them. After we did our inventory, we had a survey where the town, thanks to Robert, sent out mailers to everyone in the forest park community, where they could fill out a survey and help us understand what type of flooding conditions they were seeing, how it was affecting their property. We asked them about whether they were having a basement flooding condition, a property flooding condition, what their observations were. There was an opportunity for them to upload photos to this survey, and we compiled all that data. In total, we received 37 responses out of 130 properties there. And I've lost my numbers, but I believe we had 19 folks. We can look at figure, bear with me a second here, guys. That would be figure 2, Robert, as an attachment, or I can just describe it to you.
Why
We
don't
had,
you project it if you would?
you would like me to project it?
Sure.
How's that working, guys?
Looks good.
Perfect. So the blue properties that are on our survey have indicated that they have inundated properties, or they've had inundated properties. Yellow properties indicated that they had no flooding at all. There was a total of 6 of those, I believe. Orange was inundated basements. And then green was property flooding and basement flooding. So you can see we kind of have, we have some outliers and some folks that are having different issues that are not centralized. But then the majority of our centered problems kind of fall in the center of Forest Park. The Shady Lane, Apple Tree Drive, over to Edgewood area seem to be the concentration of the majority of the flooding issues that the community indicated to us. And so that's where we ended up focusing most of our hydrologic and hydraulic modeling. We ended up doing 2 hydrologic studies in the community, one for Shady Lane drainage system and one for the Apple Tree Drive drainage system. I'm going to change to another wetland delineate or watershed delineation map. For those of you that have packets in front of you, this would be figure 3 and 4 in Appendix D. The existing drainage systems for Shady Lane and the comments we received from the community indicated that Shady Lane had some flooding conditions during storm events where water would flow down the center of Shady Lane. Typically when we design roadways, obviously water flowing down the center of the road is not ideal. We'd like the road to shed water to the shoulders, control the water on the shoulders, and then capture it in catch basins and get it out of the road, which will help make a safe, passable environment for cars. If we can, obviously, we'd like to treat it. The existing drainage system on Shady Lane has 2 catch basins that are at the end of Shady Lane that capture the majority of the water. It is then piped via an easement out through the private property. It is then goes to a swale that ends up on Edgewood Drive, where it's picked back up in a pipe system and discharged to the west side of Edgewood Drive. We hydraulically modeled this site. The black dashed line that's indicated on this plan shows the area that drains to that system. We hydraulically modeled this site, and we found that pipes 6, 5, and 4 appear to be undersized for the 25-year storm. The town of Red Hook's Highway Department sets a standard for any new road that's installed that the stormwater system should be able to handle a 25-year storm. Back when this development was created, that didn't necessarily exist. So it's not like that's something we can hold them to. What we're trying to do is, if we're going to move forward and we're going to make any improvements to the system, we want to make sure we bring it up to today's standards as far as the highway goes. So we looked at this for the 25-year storm. We found that those 3 pipes appear to be undersized. I'm trying to think of what else we can indicate about Shady Lane. Another comment we received from a lot of folks on Shady Lane is that a lot of these folks have basement inundation. They're all pumping to different locations, and we certainly didn't map every location for each house where they're pumping. Some indicate they're pumping to the backyards. Some indicate they're pumping to the side yards. We've received some commentary that some of the sump pumps, when it gets to a freezing condition, continue to discharge out of the yard and onto the road and can create an icing condition in the road. And that's something really important that we want to drive to the town board and to the community, that we want to be conscientious of. We want to make sure that we're not causing an icing condition in the road by pumping basement sump pumps out towards the road. That can obviously become quite hazardous. It also creates a lot of onus on the highway department to sand the road a lot, sand and salt the road a lot, which can create a water quality issue as far as oversalting the road and washing that downstream. And so where we can, we'd like to pipe to the backyards where it has an opportunity to infiltrate into the ground and get discharged away from your property. Next, we'll look at the second drainage area. By the way, in the report for the town board members, the Shady Lane drainage system we've identified as the drainage area A. And then for Apple Tree Drive, we've indicated as drainage area B. The Apple Tree Drive drainage system is kind of complex and takes drainage from a lot of different roads. The Apple Tree drainage comes down Apple Tree Drive from a high point right about here. This would be just north of Shady Lane. Shady Lane is here. And flows along the gutters of the road to 2 catch basins that are at the edge of Apple Tree Drive and Overlook Drive. This drainage system also takes runoff from, this would be Birchwood Drive, through private property to a catch basin on Overlook Drive, which connects to the Apple Tree Drive system. When we hydraulically modeled this system, we found that pipes 1, 2, 5, and 7 are undersized for the 25-year storm. And when I say undersized, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're causing the flooding conditions. I'd like to just make sure that we're stating that an undersized pipe can mean that it caused a momentary backup. It could cause stormwater to be higher in structures. From the information we received from residents, it appears to us that more often than not, we have a collection issue rather than a capacity issue. And while upsizing these pipes would be important to help continue to serve the community, I haven't seen any evidence that a backup in a pipe is what's actually causing some of the drainage issues that were identified by the community. For the most part, the issue that we heard for Apple Tree Drive was that the stormwater that's flowing around the gutter of the roadway is jumping out of the roadway. When I say gutter, that's where the private property meets the edge of the roadway. Right around this property right here, the hillside starts to drain away from Apple Tree Drive. And so stormwater is jumping out of Apple Tree Drive and running through a couple of properties back here before it joins back to Lewis Drive, which is right here. Also, because of the flatness of the community, there's been a lot of water ponding issues on Apple Tree Drive and Overlook Drive, where residents have shown photos of water kind of not only ponding, but staying for a long period of time. So in our hydraulic assessment, we looked at not only upgrading the pipes, but how we could increase collection so that we provide an opportunity for water to positively drain away from people's houses and private property, and also provide a way for the roadway to positively drain, and then collect that all, and then discharge it to a safe point where we're not impacting anybody. The next section of our report after the hydraulic modeling talks about proposed improvements. We basically came up with 2 different proposed improvements where we worked on collection and conveyance of stormwater. As you can see on Shady Lane, this would be figure 5 and 6 in Appendix E for the folks that are looking at it in hard copy. Our recommendation is that we provide grass swales along the edge of Shady Lane. The reason we go with grass swales is that usually they're, in the grand scheme of things, fairly inexpensive to put in. They're easy to maintain because they're very visual. We also want to put driveway culverts in under each one of the driveways so that we can convey the water past people's properties. The grass swales provide an opportunity for the roadway to positively drain and not have stormwater flowing down the center of the roadway. We would then collect that water in two pipes and connect it to the existing system. We would upgrade the pipes that pass through the 2 private properties here, replacing that swale with a pipe here. And then previously I had said that the pipes, I think it's 6, 5 here, need to be replaced, and this pipe here need to be upsized. So we've upsized those pipes as well. The total cost of this proposed improvement, if we were to have a contractor complete it, we had listed as $220,000 for these improvements. Figure 6 shows the proposed improvements for Apple Tree Drive and Birchwood. This system shows grass swales and driveway culverts along Apple Tree Drive, again, to help with that collection of the stormwater, keep the stormwater from jumping out of the roadway here and making sure we're conveying it downstream. We also have proposed to upgrade the piping on private property through these two areas, as we had showed that these weren't meeting hydraulic capacity. And again, that's just for the 25-year storm. We also would like to replace a couple of catch basins and drainage manholes back here. Because of where they're located, they haven't been seeing regular maintenance. I think they're a little difficult to get to. So we'd like to replace those with new structures that are brought to the surface and make them easier to maintain. Ultimately, we would upsize pipes heading down all the way through Lewis Drive, where we would keep the existing outfall and obviously discharge to a safe place away from the residents' properties. The proposed improvements would not fix any groundwater issues for the folks, but this would help remove some of the water from the ponding issues. The grass swales would also provide an opportunity for folks to discharge some pumps to a safe location that wouldn't be the roadway. So they're helpful from that perspective. And obviously keeping the roads free and clear of water is a major safety issue. The proposed improvements for Apple Tree Drive were $280,000. And that, again, that's for a contractor to do the repairs, and does not include bid prices or engineering and bidding. Two other proposed improvement areas, which were part of still in Appendix E for the board, were smaller improvements that didn't necessarily require hydraulic modeling. Edgewood Drive, which is at the northwest corner of the development. Edgewood Drive has a couple of catch basins that look like they were added later in the development, potentially by private landowners. They're smaller, atypical catch basins, but within the highway right-of-way. We would recommend them being replaced. They also don't appear to be fully connected to the drainage system. So we'd like to see those tied in and replaced with catch basins that meet the highway standards. On Mountain View Court, there's an issue where basically this area is pretty flat here and Mountain View is fairly short. We'd like to see a potential grass swale be put in on Mountain View Court where the water could be collected. Right now it's draining off of Mountain View Court and kind of discharging towards this direction across this property. We'd like to see that collected and conveyed down to the existing drainage system on Kalina Drive. The prospective costs for Edgewood, I believe, was $16,000 and Mountain View was $12,000. The other kind of portion of the proposed improvements was the couple of maintenance structures that we had previously talked about, where Teresa could stop at. And we had identified those as 3 structures on Kalina Drive and the 1 structure on Evergreen Lane. They're listed in the GIS system as needing to be replaced. You see that they're different color in the inventory assessment. You may note that in this inventory assessment, there's other structures that are also yellow and orange. The reason we haven't indicated those for replacement is because they're part of the larger projects that we just discussed. So instead of having Teresa replace those as part of maintenance, they would be replaced as part of the larger structures, the larger projects. Sorry. As Robert had mentioned, we had put this in a draft report and given it to the town board and Robert to review, as well as Teresa. We anticipate being able to clean up any couple of comments in the next week and then return that back to you guys.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. So I guess we can talk about options. It's a lot to digest, but
And just to clarify that you said the prices, the estimates that you gave us do not include engineering or bidding for any of them, right?
Correct. That would just be the cost for the contractor to construct the project. We didn't add in engineering and bidding. The hydraulic modeling we did for the purpose of this study is a great first step. Typically, when we do something like this and it's going to construction, Christine, we'd like to get a survey, make sure all of the inverts are absolutely correct, and we're not just guesstimating or estimating slopes of pipes. We would like to do something a little more concrete if we were going to go out for construction. So there's a little bit more design work that would have to occur. Certainly the proposed improvements that we made today are kind of a preliminary look at the system. So we'd have to do some design work. And then there's a little bit of cost in going out to bid for a contractor.
Thank you.
Right, and some of the work could be done in-house if there were sufficient staffing and time, and I assume part of it we may want to consider getting a contractor for. Is that where you land in this, Ryan?
I would believe that to be correct, Robert. Yeah, I think certainly there's some items that can be picked away at. And then some of the larger projects, depending on what staff levels are, may be best to identify a contractor for.
Okay.
Ryan, I had a question, and maybe it's kind of answered by the way you presented the material, but if the town were to phase this project or kind of take it in chunks, would you have recommendations of how we would approach that chronologically?
Good question, Julie. Typically, when you do drainage work, you've got to start at the downstream end and work your way back up, only because if you make an improvement ahead and you still leave a constricted pipe down below, it doesn't do anybody any good. So usually you have to start at your outfall and kind of work your way back, and take on what you can do as you get there. There may be an opportunity, and I guess I'd have to think about it a little bit more, where we could be more impactful with a couple of upstream improvements in the near future, and then work on the downstream things, like where we're getting water jumping out of the roadway or things like that. We might want to fix those first before we, depending on what phasing looked like, if that would be helpful.
Focus on the collection as opposed to dispersion. Is that what you're saying?
I think there may be an opportunity for that, Robert. I guess I hadn't really dived into that yet, but yeah, I mean, so what we found was that none of the pipes are completely failed and impassable. It appears like they're all working well. I just think there was some sizing discrepancies for the storms. And I apologize for not mentioning this previously, but this system may have been sized appropriately for this storm modeling that they were doing at the time the development was made. And so, because of our storm intensities have changed, what we model storms to be today is larger than previous. And so what would have been a decent sized pipe for a 10-year storm previously may not be a good sized pipe for a 10-year storm now. And so while we are getting 10-year storms and 10-year storm intensities, we're not getting them regularly. So we may be able to make some improvements with collection that help handle the majority of storms, while we work to make improvements further down the road to help handle larger storms, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it is true in many of these neighborhoods, especially the sort of IBM era ones, that they have had historically flooding or drainage issues for decades, right? I mean, it's not new news that they've had these issues, correct?
That is correct, Robert. We've gotten a feedback from a number of community members. Some have said they've had, this hasn't happened since 1990. Other folks have said that area has been wet since I was a child and I lived here since the 60s. So, obviously everybody has their own perspective and what they're viewing and may have different timeframes that they've seen the property. But certainly there's been indications that there's been flooding in this area for some time now.
Yeah.
That's not a new issue.
Right. And then Chris, did you want to talk to us a little bit about drainage districts or not yet? Are we a little ahead of ourselves?
Well, I mean,
What that is?
Brian, you didn't, You didn't touch so much on the additional residential improvements that you identified outside of the road system that are really sort of a result of the property being, as you described, fairly flat and having some sort of inherent drainage issues in the development itself. You had a couple of areas identified in Apple Tree and Colina area where there were some drainage areas there that might benefit from some additional improvements, right?
Yeah, I can, I just brought that figure up for the folks, the board members that may be looking at a report that's would be Appendix F. Figures 8 and 9, I believe it to be.
And so this is not by any means a drainage study for that sort of thing, but there are a couple of ways to deal with private drainage improvements. And obviously one is for neighbors to get together and work it out and get it done. And another is for people to petition the town to create a drainage district, which is then assessed against all the benefited properties. That's a process. So it would probably take a further engineering study in order to really pursue that. But I think that the first question would be, is that something that people want to consider? You know, particularly the neighbors involved.
Right. Yeah, that's something the whole neighborhood almost could participate in if they wanted to, just not. The inclination would be that, unless the problem is of a certain magnitude, people don't generally welcome, having a new line on their tax bill for the special benefit assessment district, much like a water and sewer, and Forest Park already has a water district, a
But
private water
for
system.
example, Ryan, you may want to describe this better, but there's a swale that apparently is on the rear of the properties that has been over time allowed to grow up with vegetation, trees and shrubs and that sort of thing that are potentially interfering with what was intended to be some kind of a drainage system there, or at least a ponding and area where water could go and be absorbed. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Chris. Basically, there was 2 areas we identified in the report. Like Chris said, these were low-lying areas that were basically the back lot lines of properties. The first one's between Birchwood and Edgewood Drive, and the other one's going to be between Birchwood and Apple Tree Drive. The indications from the original plans that we have don't show stormwater practices back there, but they do indicate that stormwater infrastructure was put to collect stormwater out of these swales. I think they were originally just low-lying areas, and over time they've grown up with vegetation and trees and leaf litter, which have become a blockage for stormwater to quickly leave the area. So the one area here was the Birchwood Apple Tree Drive. It ties into a culvert that takes it under Colina Drive and out to an outfall. And the second area, this is Apple Tree Drive here. Birchwood is off page to the other side. And this is actually picked up and collected by the town's drainage system and carried all the way down to Louise Drive. The swales have just kind of become overgrown and are no longer being maintained.
So that's really kind of a different category of work than the drainage areas along the town roads, but wanted to point that out as another part of what has been identified in his preliminary study.
To work on private property and with or without existing easements, yeah. Okay, Ryan, that's a lot to absorb and to think about. Is there anything else you would like us to be aware of? We'll consider this draft report maybe come back to you all and ask for some advice if we did want to, as Julia said, maybe tackle the low hanging fruit. Not to put words in your mouth, Julia, but what that might look like, staying, of course, within the town's right of way. If there are a few measures, I think you've already articulated some of those. And look at a proposal for that, and then we'll take a look at, scheduling and whether we can do it in-house and whether we have the funding for it, so on and so forth.
Yeah, we would love to help with that, Robert. Let me think on it a little bit more, and hopefully I can come up with a prioritized list of improvements we can make.
Okay, good. Town board members, anything more for now, or?
No, thank you for the presentation. Helped me
Sure.
put it into, workable sections. Understand, the underlying issues that are there. Soils in many cases are bad, so there's, only so much we can do.
Sure.
One quick question I have is, in the report, which I read yesterday, you've broken out the different sections and your estimated cost. The way you wrote the report, is that your prioritization of which should go first, or is that just, I'm trying to get an idea of, you have, one section that you talk about, 280,000, another is less. I'm just curious whether you put them in a prioritized order in the report or not.
I did not put them in a prioritized order. The order that are in were the two that were hydraulically modeled, and the other two were ones that were more just collection issues, didn't require hydraulic modeling. I think I'd have to put more thought into if we could prioritize, one issue over the other, or who was, you'd have to figure out how impacts occurred, and I think I'd have to think about that one a little bit more.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ryan.
no problem, Robert.
I think that's all the time we have on that topic, but thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and we'll be back to you probably, I would say, in a couple meetings, maybe sometime in October. We'd be looking for some follow up and some maybe proposals on how we might approach this one step at a time and see how effective it is. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ryan. Have a good night.
Good night.
You too.
And very good. Okay, we're back. Folks, that's all we have on tonight's agenda. Our next meeting is September 28th. We're going to be taking up a couple of issues. We've had some correspondence. Our highway super would like us to consider going out on an RFP to have private companies plow a couple of our developments. So we'll be taking that issue up at the next meeting. And a couple of others. We have some reorg that we need to do. We've gotten more correspondence related to the housing committee, more and more interest, and some folks have been calling up for that. So when and if we're ready to start populating that committee, we'll be tackling that as well. Is there anything else before we close tonight's meeting, folks? If you're watching at home, we have Hardscrabble Day coming up this Saturday with a lineup of lots of bands starting at 4:30, going all the way till about 10 o'clock. The last act goes on at about 8:30. And that's all we have for tonight. Folks, anything else? Tivoli Street painting the following weekend, September 24th, rain date October 1st, as a reminder. Hope everyone's staying healthy and safe. This time I'd like to make a motion, we close the meeting. For a second.
Second.
Thank you, Christine. All in favor? Bill Hamel,
Aye.
Julia Solomon. Good night. Thank you, folks, and thanks for your patience as we incurred some technical